Bienvenidos, Ushamdid, and welcome Anne Arundel Community College learners from the Spring 2023 semester taking the CTS-233 Section 400 Network Programmability course. This is the Cisco Networking Academy's DEVASC 200-901 Certification Exam Preparation course, and in this supplemental tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at Module 4, and specifically Postman and the MapQuest API. In the previous video, we looked at Postman, we learned how to create collections, how to create a workspace, and then how to have Postman actually help us generate the Python code that we could then simply cut and paste into a file and run. And now we're going to be integrating the MapQuest API into this conversation. So in Module 4, you were asked to create a MapQuest account at developer.mapquest.com. If we go to log in here, and I will log in right now, what you would see is your account information. Now, something I've been seeing over the last few days is this error right here, saying that there's an error fetching the application keys. So we need to generate a key in order to be able to use the MapQuest API, and that prevents spamming of the API by making sure that the users that are using the MapQuest API have a valid key and that have actually come in and registered here. Now, this went away the following day and I was able to see my keys. My recommendation to you is that you could either use the key that you see me using, or when you get an opportunity, generate your own key. A window will pop up. It's going to ask you for the key name and then a callback URL. You do not need to put a callback URL in. You simply can put the key name in and then that key name will show up here. So you could call it DevNet practice key or whatever. So make sure that you copy and save that key. I do have the key in a number of Python scripts that I've used. So let's go ahead now and take a look at the documentation, because the API documentation, similar to the Cisco library documentation on the DEVASC virtual machine, is extremely helpful. And so we're interested in the Directions API, and make sure that you become very familiar with the Directions API, because we're going to be looking at a lot of different options here. Now you can see we've got the HTTP verbs or the HTTP methods here, get and post. And so I'm going to be demonstrating how you can use get, how we can then leverage what Postman is doing for us to then generate the Python code to create a Python script. So let's go ahead and click on get. Now let's break down the different parts of the URL here. So HTTP, now it could be HTTP, it could be HTTPS, but this is referred to as the scheme, right? So HTTP and HTTPS, that is the scheme. Everything that follows up to right there is considered the authority. Now think of the authority as simply the address. It could be an IP address in here, or it could be a URL, which DNS would then resolve to an IP address. Now, what follows is considered the path. In other words, the path to the resource. And you can see we've got an example over here, which then, after the path, has the query. And remember, we saw in Postman how the question mark is going to give us a key, right? So this is all part of the query. So why don't we do this? Let's copy this example right here, and let's cruise over to Postman to see what we're able to do. So I've got a collection, I've got workspaces. What if I were to do this? I'm going to create a workspace. We're going to call this workspace MapQuest, because this is where I'll keep all my MapQuest work, all my MapQuest API work. I'm going to go ahead and make it available to the team. You could make it available to the public, or just for yourself, but let's create that workspace. So here we are, and you can see it now shows up here. I've got a MapQuest workspace. I've got a YouTube videos. I've got AACC. So I've got different workspaces for different things I'm going to be doing. Now that I'm in the workspace, I can create a collection. So maybe, again, I want to have my GET requests, right? Separate from my POST requests, separate from my PUT requests. And so this is something we can do here. So now that I've got my requests, or I should say, now that I have my collection of GET requests, now I can add a request. So let's do that. So we're going to give it a new name, and I'm just going to call it, we'll say MapQuest route GET. And we'll say 001 in case we have a number of them. So it's now saved this GET request off. And let's come down here and let's paste in what we have here. Now, I'm going to run this intentionally so that it generates an error so that we can see what's going to happen here. Now, remember, there's the scheme, HTTP. Here is the authority or the address, followed by the path. Oops, sorry, I wanted to highlight there, not drag. Followed by the path to the resource on the API server, on the MapQuest API server. And then here is my query, right? So I've got a key, and that's that MapQuest key I talked about. And then remember, the ampersand is like a separator of these key value pairs. So I've got the key, and then I've got the from with the address here. And then I've got another ampersand to separate it from the to and its value. And remember, the equal sign, think of that as the assignment operator. So the key is going to get the value of KEY. From is going to get the value of Clarendon Boulevard in Virginia. To is going to get the value of Glebe Road, Arlington, Virginia. And I'm going to show you how we can actually manipulate right here where the directions are taking us. But I'm going to run this right now. Actually, let's save it. I'm going to run it. And what we're going to see is the app key submitted with this request is invalid. Absolutely is, because it's right here that we need our MapQuest key. And I believe I have it displayed right here. So again, if you can't generate your own, feel free to use this key here. But that is the value that needs to go in the key equal, or key is being assigned the value of that key. So now let's go ahead, click save. We'll save it so we have our key in there. And I'm going to click send and take a look at this. So now in JSON format, we're receiving all of the data that MapQuest or Google Maps would typically display in their website. In the browser, you would see a GUI representation of this. This is all of the detailed information of that route in JSON format. Now, I can click up here and try to manipulate things, or I can just simply click down here. What if I said, well, you know what? I don't know about Glebe Road and this other location, so let's just say Baltimore and then San Francisco, right? Two very well-known cities. Now that's what the request looks like. So let's save it, because I prefer this request here. But again, I've still got my key. I've still got my from, or my starting destination, which is Baltimore, and where am I going? And the to value is San Francisco. And you can see the keys are displayed right down here. We also have the header information. Again, remember, we've got 7 hidden. If you click here, always remember that it typically hides the majority of those. And you can see cache control, Postman token, that's going to be calculated when set, the user agent. So we are sending in our HTTP request, we are sending these headers along with our request. So we'll come back to the parameters. Let's send the request. And here we go, right? So we get back the route, right? And this is a JSON object, right? And that open curly brace right here, and then everything that follows, right? That is all inside of a JSON object. Now, inside this JSON object, you're going to see that we have key value pairs, and the key here is legs, or legs of the trip. But then we've got the bracket, which in Python is a list. JSON calls it an array, which is why you'll sometimes hear me say array when I'm talking about it in Python. Now, we've got the real time. We've got the distance, 2,821 miles. How long it's going to take us, the formatted time, 40 hours and 36 minutes. Whether there's toll roads, bridges, closures, whatever the case may be, we get all of that information. You get all of the turn information here. So take a look. This is how on the website it's displaying, okay, you go 0.1305 miles, and then you're going to continue on to Commerce Street, right? And so all of your turn-by-turn directions are here. Now, it took us 1,749 seconds to receive or to have this request completed. 18 kilobytes of information. Status request 200, meaning it was okay. That was not the status request when we pulled the key out. So if I was to copy the key and then get rid of it and put that in there, and let's rerun it, what status request do we get? Take a look at that. That's how we could generate a 403 forbidden. The request was a legal request, but the server is refusing to respond to it. Unlike the 401 unauthorized, authenticating will make no difference, right? So if I was to drop my key back in here and we were to go ahead and click send, it's going to run again and give us that information. Now, more importantly, right, we've looked at the scheme, we've looked at the authority, we've looked at the path, and then we've seen the query, right? The query portion starts after that question mark. That question mark is delimiting from the entire URI made up of the scheme, the authority, of the path. The question mark is delineating, right, or separating the rest of the URI from the query. Now, most importantly for us, how can I use this if I need to generate a Python script? Well, let's take a look. Let's just click on that little code symbol right there. Now, you can see we get the curl representation, which I could run from the command line. And let's see what happens if we do that. Let me pop over here to the CLI, and I am 100% certain I have curl on here, and I do. But let's see what happens when we run that. And it says bad format, missing URL, and there could be something wrong there. Again, I do not use curl with this, but we'll use Python. So again, I was hoping that it would work. It didn't. And let's see, maybe it works with the virtual machine. Is curl on here? It is. Or actually, did I type curl twice? Hold on one second. Let me do paste. We're not going to get that. We're going to get the key. Let me go back over here. Did I type in curl twice at the beginning? I did not. Okay. So I was under the impression that this would have worked. Bad illegal format or missing URL. And it should have taken that URL. But we can come back to that at a later time. Let's float down here to Python using the requests library. And so here is what we would need. Well, let's see, is this going to work? So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to copy this, and let's go over to VS Code. Why not? Let's create a new file, right? And I'm just going to make it a Python file. I'm going to paste in my Python information here. You can see we've got an unsaved, we have a unsaved notification here. Let's say file, save as, and I'm just going to call this MapQuest test 01.py, and let's go ahead and say run, and run without debugging. So you can see we get a whole bunch of information, and there it is, right? Now, it doesn't get printed out nice and pretty like it does in Postman, but all of that information that we're seeing in Postman is right in here. You can see route, session, and then we've got the real time, the distance. So I've just created a Python program. Now, what could I do with this Python program now that I have this JSON data being output to the screen as a result? Well, we can write a script, right? And I believe I've got the script right here called directions.py. And so this is going to be using the MapQuest API, and you can see I have a variable name called MapQuest_API, which is being assigned the value of the URI all the way up to the query delimiter, which is the question mark. And I love how they use the question mark, because if you think of a query as a question, right? If I'm going to inquire about something, I'm going to be asking questions. So think of it like that, that question mark is the query delimiter. I then have a variable to capture my API key so that I can use it in my script. And I've got the origin and the destination here. So we're going to go from Santa Rosa, California on Oregon Drive to 200 Orange Avenue in Coronado. Now, let's take a look down here at what else we've got going on. Now, we will get to the URL lib parse, which encodes all of that information into the URL. And actually, I should probably change that to URI. But we take the MapQuest API, we concatenate it with the result of this information here. And what that URL lib.parse.url encode does is it takes our API key, it takes our from origin, it takes our to destination, and it's going to generate the URI that we see right here. So there's the key, right? There's our key, and then the ampersand, and then our from, and then the ampersand, and then the to. And that's all that this URL lib.parse.url encode does, is it generates the key, the from, and the to, and puts it into the format that's needed to concatenate with the main MapQuest API URL, which we have right up here. So really, the URL lib.parse.url encode is giving us all of the query string that we need after the question mark. All right, so we come down here and you can see we're asking for the JSON data. We're going to capture that. We're going to get the GET request to get the information in JSON format, and we capture it in JSON data, and then we print the JSON data. Now, the other things we can do is parse that JSON data. And we haven't spoken about this yet, but here's how we would parse into that data to pull the status code out, right? We can further parse into that data to get the formatted time, right? So how long is the trip going to take? And then we can take a look at the travel in miles here. And we could look at fuel used, although that's commented out right now. And then we've got some turn-by-turn directions. So we're going to use a for loop to iterate through all of the different legs of the trip, right? The maneuvers, and we're going to print each of those out along with the narrative, which is, turn left on I Street, and then the distance that we're going to be going. And so let's see what this looks like as a Python script running and actually parsing some of the data out of that JSON output. And so I can simply say, I thought I had it in here, python3 directions.py. So there's all that JSON data, but take a look here. Here are your turn-by-turn directions. Head toward Nebraska Drive on Oregon Drive. Go for 0.2 miles. Turn right onto Summerfield Road. Go right onto Hohen Avenue. Continue on to Hohen Frontgate Road, California 12, out to the 101, or actually, does it take, yeah, to the US 101. And so there are your turn-by-turn directions. So very, very cool. All right. Well, that is how we can leverage Postman to get us started on our script in order to say, give me these directions. We now have it saved so that I can come back and refer to it. And where is it saved? Well, it's in my MapQuest workspaces under the collections. This is our GET request. Again, you could do post request. You could do whatever you want here and organize it any way you see fit. But hopefully this should help you get going. And let's see, I'm curious to see possibly what ChatGPT is going to say here, because I'm always curious as to whether or not ChatGPT is going to give us some legitimate answers. So let's see if I say, using the MapQuest API, produce for me a Python script that prints the directions from Santa Rosa, California to Coronado, California, and gives you the turn-by-turn directions. All right, well, let's see what ChatGPT's got for us here. So it's going to take a second probably because we asked it something a little bit complex, but I'm curious to see if ChatGPT is going to import the request module. Is it going to import URL lib.parse? And here we go. Let's see what ChatGPT gives us. All right, so we got the import requests, and it looks like it's going to go ahead and put the whole endpoint as the URI, and it's going to do the params. Okay, good. So it's going to use the parameters. Instead of putting it as part of the URI, they're going to be passing that information in as parameters. All right, and so it's checking to see if the status code is 200, right? Something we didn't check for. Maybe that's a great check. And then here you go, route, legs, and then they do a nested for loop, or ChatGPT is doing a nested for loop, but ultimately we get down to maneuvers and they're printing the narrative. All right, your API key, and take a look at that. They know, ChatGPT knows to tell you, hey, your API key needs to go here. So what could we do with this? Well, let's grab this. Why not? And let's see what this would produce. And I've already got the API key, so I'm going to say ChatGPT MapQuest.py. Let's paste that information in here. Again, oops, didn't want to do that. I was hitting, So let's do this here, and let's paste that in there, and let's make sure we hit the escape key so I can get in command mode, get back up here, and we're going to put our API key in here. So we'll pull this back. Let's pull up the API key, which is right there, all the way up to the ampersand, back over to here. We paste that API key in. We're going to save this. I'm going to say Python 3, ChatGPT MapQuest API, and take a look at that. Work like a champ, right? So this is giving you multiple solutions, and let's go ahead and cat that out. This has given us multiple solutions and multiple ways to think about how we might want to solve this problem. Do I put it all and I use the URL lib.parse, or do I use the params and then pass that in as part of the parameters that are going to be sent in, the key, the from, and the to? All right, well, this is going to wrap up this supplemental video tutorial for Module 4, where we took a look at Postman and the MapQuest API. We looked at the docs for the MapQuest API, talked about how to get your key so that you can run queries, and then how we can run those queries in Postman, save them, generate the Python code, and then we even spun out and took a look at ChatGPT to see what ChatGPT thought would be an answer. And then we looked at a script that actually gives us a breakdown of a lot of that information, the total miles, turn-by-turn directions, all kinds of different information. And like I said, ChatGPT checked to see if the return code was 200, because if it's not, maybe we want to throw an error message up. That wasn't in my script. Maybe that's something we pull from that ChatGPT script. All right. Well, hopefully this is assisting you in the course and you're learning a ton of really, really cool stuff. And as always, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.